Hey, and welcome back to the podcast. We are in week 5 of April. So this is our last episode for our theme for the month of April, which was gospel-centered ministry. And so just kind of a recap over the last couple weeks, because, let's be honest, April has been super busy for most of us. And you might have missed an episode. You might have just forgot what we've been talking about, and that's fine. So week 1, we talked about why the gospel is more important than an altar call, and how the gospel has to be more than an altar call. It's not just a moment, it's a life change. And so we talked about how the gospel has to be transformative and how the gospel can't be a moment in time. And we kind of really landed on the idea of the gospel is more than, we have to be more than tour guides. It's a fully immersive experience. And so then we went to, a lot of times we talk about the gospel, we talk about the idea of preaching to those that haven't heard. And so week 2, we talked about preaching to the gospel to students who've heard it before, and how to kind of fight the familiarity fatigue of being like, oh, well, I already know this. And then also not oversimplifying the gospel. And just working on the idea of, how do we rediscover the wonder? How do we teach for depth? And how do we basically make it something that students, even after they've heard the gospel, can be something that they want to go back to? Then week 3, we talked about grace without lowering the bar. And we talked about how the gospel gives us that grace, and how grace shouldn't remove the standard, but it empowers us to meet the standard. And so we oftentimes misunderstand grace, but when we look at Jesus and use Jesus as the model, then we oftentimes can understand what it means to use grace properly, and to understand and explain grace to other people and use grace effectively. And then finally, last week, we talked about helping students live from resurrection hope. And so it's all about Easter. There's excitement, there's celebration, there's energy. All that is great, but we're in this season now of okay, well, what happens after Easter? How do we keep that conversation going? How do we pull that to continue this idea of how students see themselves, how they see their lives and how they live their lives, how they face fear, how they understand their future. And the gospel has all to do with that. If the resurrection is real, it should reshape every one of those qualities. And so we kind of just boiled it down to the idea last week of students are sent, they're not just saved. And so if students aren't having and receiving a call to action right now, then that's something that we are missing out on, and we're not doing them the service that they need, because we are giving them the materials to go, but we're not commissioning them to go. And then so we have to understand that everyday hope is built on the gospel. And so that means resurrection looks like a Tuesday, it looks like a Monday, it looks like a Wednesday, it looks like a Sunday. And so we have to teach them how to see hope and anxiety, hope and failure, hope and identity struggles, hope and uncertainty. All those things are really, really pivotal, because resurrection is for every day, not just Wednesdays and Sundays. So, which kind of brings us to our last topic for the month. And today we're just sitting down with the idea that the gospel doesn't just shape what we say, the gospel shapes how we lead, or it changes how we lead. And so we kind of have to ask
about this one.
Yeah, we kind of have to ask one final question with this. And it's, what if the gospel shapes our message but not our leadership? Because it's possible to preach grace, teach truth, talk about Jesus, but still lead in ways that don't reflect him. And so we say it all the time, practice what you preach. But can we talk about the gospel while operating out of pressure, control, or performance And so we really have to kind of go into this idea of like the gospel doesn't just change what we preach, it changes how we lead. And if we
Mm-hmm.
are not using the gospel in our own lives to change us as people, then we are not living out what we need to be living out as a model to show students how to do it as well.
So let's talk about that, because I think this is where most of us as leaders are struggling, and I've certainly talked a lot about it on the podcast. Is like, so this idea is like, we talk about the gospel, so we're doing all the right things, right? We're preaching grace, we're teaching truth, we're talking about Jesus, we're doing all those things, but yet we're operating as leaders, as people, out of those high, heavy pressure situations, trying to control our environment, control our outcome, um, and ultimately becoming a performance. And most of us are trying to balance this line between presenting something that is worthy of worship for God, but also being human. And should our services look more like something really high polished, scripted from A to Z, or should it be something that's more human and raw and real? Or should it be a balance of the two? And all of us are trying to navigate this, and I think we can certainly fall into that trap of, feeling that pressure of being perfect, performing, controlling the situation, whatever you have it. And this is truly an equalizer of a conversation. This doesn't, like, whether you're in youth ministry, children's ministry, music ministry, pastoral ministry, a small group leader, whatever it might be, every single one of us feel this
Yeah.
tier of leadership. And so how do we balance, you know, preaching what matters, keeping everything gospel centered, while also trying to sort of walk this tightrope of pressure and control?
Yeah. No, definitely. And you kind of hit it on the head with the idea of we all deal with this, and this is kind of fresh on my mind because our men's Bible study on Tuesday, for the last 2 weeks we've been reading Hebrews, and we've been reading Hebrews for a long time, but we're in Hebrews 10, and we're in like 26 through 31. And so it talks about a few different things, but one of the biggest things that it talks about is this idea of like, um, basically there's like ways that like the call of salvation or the way to salvation is no longer available to you. And one of the people that we talked about was Charles Templeton. And I don't know if you're listening to this, or David, I don't even know if you know who that is, but Charles Templeton was kind of Billy Graham's co-evangelist. Um, and so like the dude did all these different things. He was a mass evangelist. From 1936 to 1938, he toured the U.S., preaching in 44 states. And then like, dude absolutely kind of went over. He was a close friend of Billy Graham's. They co-founded Youth for Christ International. Um, and then later in his life, Templeton quits evangelism, becomes agnostic, and then eventually becomes atheist. And like it's just this mindset of like, something we're talking about, this idea of like, like how do we teach what we don't live? And I feel like that's part of it, is like, you can only do it for so long until you convince yourself otherwise. And so like, definitely fresh on my mind because we literally we're recording this on Wednesday. We talked about it yesterday. Um, and so like there's a lot of danger to it too. Like if you're not, if like going back to the same phrase, if you're not practicing what you preach, if you're not allowing God to wrestle those doubts that you have or anything to that nature, like there's so much that can come out of that, and it doesn't necessarily have to be a good thing. Um, and so like we talked about this interesting correlation between Charles Templeton and Billy Graham. They both confessed to having doubts, just Templeton never got over his.
That's huge.
Billy Graham said that he doubted the oh shoot, I don't remember what his specific doubt was off the top of my head, but he said that he doubted the doubted different things. I think maybe one of them was like the the contradictions in scripture, and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And so basically, like, he had doubts just like Charles did, but he said eventually he just had to lay it down and say, look, God, if you say this is true, you say this is living and active, and all of these words are yours, then I have to lay it down at your feet and believe it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's where the conversation goes, is like, if we genuinely experience the gospel, then like we can't just teach it, we have to live it too. And
Right.
we all have different struggles and moments of weakness,
Mm-hmm.
and we're not necessarily going into the conversation of like, oh, well, you have to be sinless because you're a youth pastor. Like, that's not what we're saying at
Mm-hmm.
all. So don't take it that way, please. But at the end of the day, like, if the gospel's not influencing the way you live and how you spend your time, then that needs to be a focal priority of, you need to start looking into that and making that a thing. So, but I think we have to kind of discuss this kind of gap between belief and practice, though. Like, it's sometimes easier to practice than to believe, and sometimes it's easier to believe without practice. And so most leaders believe the gospel theologically, but functionally is a little more questionable. We can drift into performance-based leadership. We can drift into fear-driven decisions.
Mm-hmm.
We can drift into comparison with other ministries. And we can drift into control instead of trust.
Yep.
We say God's grace is enough, but lead like it all depends on me.
Mm-hmm. It's the angel hero complex.
Yeah. And so, but the thing is that gap is huge, because students don't just learn from what we say, they learn from how we operate.
Yep.
So what does it actually look like to lead from the gospel? It should change everything. Because of grace, we don't lead from pressure. We lead from acceptance. Because of the cross, we don't hide weakness. We lead with humility. Because of the resurrection, we don't lead with fear. We lead with confidence in God's power. And I mean, Ephesians 2, we're not saved by our works. We're saved by grace. That truth doesn't just save us, it should shape how we lead. So, if your leadership requires you to prove your worth, I'm going to say that again. If your leadership requires you to prove your worth, basically you have to be the name, you're not leading from the gospel. And I don't want to say that I'm a perfect example of this by any means, because I'm not. We all have struggles, but it was one of those things of like, this past Sunday, we did our first of 2 senior Sundays. Due to scheduling conflicts, we have to have 2. But our first one was also a youth Sunday. And so our youth led the entire service. We had a full student worship team up. We had a sophomore preach. We had another kid that was a junior lead the children's time. And so, like, start to finish, youth group took over the whole thing. All I did was say, hey, good morning, glad y'all are all here, pray with me. And, like, that was it. And so, like, with that, so many people came up after me, and they're like, oh, man, you did such a good job. You did such a good job. I was like, no, I didn't do anything. And they were like, no, but, like, there's so much prep and planning. And I was like, no, you don't understand. I didn't do anything. Like, students stepped up, students did their thing, and sure, there's planning and stuff like that, but I was like, physically, I did nothing. Like,
Yeah.
I cannot shape my excitement more of the
Yeah.
fact that, like, I did not lead anything.
Mm-hmm.
which is really, really important. And I didn't, at the end of the day, I didn't want it to be my show on Sunday. I don't want it to be my show on Wednesdays either. I want students to take lead and students to take charge, because the more that students own their youth ministry right now is the more opportunity that they have to own their faith when they leave.
Exactly that. But for the person who's listening that goes, oh, cool, how do I do that? There was a lot of planning and cultivating your students to get to a point where they can do that confidently. So Brent is now sort of reaping the harvest of years and years and years of giving students more reins and more reins until they can get to a point where they can ultimately do that. Your worship team being able to lead, this is something you've been working on for 3 years, or has it been 4 now? Okay, it's been a lot longer, but I meant as far as like you not having any adults whatsoever there.
Since I started at this church, and realistically, it's been a goal of mine for my 15 years in youth ministry.
Oh yeah, your entire time. And so this is something you have carefully cultivated and crafted. Ooh, look at that. I got 3 C's in there.
Carefully
the Baptists would be
cultivated
so
and
proud
crafted.
in me. I guess there's enough Baptist roots in me. It's always like, it's a 3-point sermon, or it's, what's the word where everything starts with the same letter?
I don't know.
There's an English term. It's been 18 years, guys. I've been in school, but well, I guess not including college, but whatever. Anyway.
Yeah. No, and I think part of that though is like, you talk about the time and the effort. The time and the effort's not worth it unless that's your goal.
Yeah.
Definitely. There have been many, many, many times that it would have been easier for me to just be like, I can do it, it's fine. But
and it might have gone better.
My goal is not for me to be the show.
Right.
My goal is for students to take charge and students to lead, and that has been something that I've tried and worked on doing for my entire time here. And that's students taking initiative and being leaders in our youth. Students taking initiative in worshiping as leaders, students leading and lessons as leaders. All of those things are super, super important. But so the thing is though, is like I said, if your leadership requires you to prove your worth, you're missing out. Because that's not the point. It's not the youth pastor show. It's not the youth pastor's group. It's the students group. You are there to be the administration and the leadership to make sure nothing blows up.
Exactly. It's like I remind our students all the time, like, hey, they'll say stuff like, how do we do this, or can we do this, or just like I remind them all the time, like, this is your youth ministry. What do you want from it?
Yeah.
And I remind my leaders that too, because sometimes we can make it about ourselves because we put so much of our heart and our time and our effort.
Yeah.
And there are times where we want certain things and certain aspects. And I like to remind our leaders, this isn't our youth group. We get to shepherd theirs.
Yeah.
Which is a really special thing. It's a really special thing. Our time came and went a long time ago.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a beautiful thing that we get the opportunity to shepherd their experience.
Yeah.
And so sometimes we need to remind ourselves, like, we get to do this, not that we have to do this. We really do get to. And I know that's a oversimplification that gets used a lot, almost to the point of cliche at this point. But sometimes we need to go back and pinch ourselves. I look back, Brent and I have both got our start really early in life. But little Brent and little David, you went and told that high school student, that little junior high student, that we would get to do what we if we just explained our day to day, dude, I would have been stoked to know that I get to do what I get to do today.
Oh yeah.
I would have been I would have been I get married, I have a kid, I get to play guitar, I get to do all these incredible, I get to hang out with students and and I would have been really, really excited.
I don't have to sit behind a desk.
Hello. And I would have been really happy that youth ministry evolved away from constant video games and pizza, because I hated it, if I'm honest.
Yeah.
Mostly because I'm terrible at those things. But,
Yeah.
seeing where youth ministry is gone and like the fun things that we get to do,
Yeah.
and the experiences that we get, man. If I got to show a Sunday morning to young David and young Brent, dude, I think we would have been like over the moon
Yeah.
that was our future. And
Yeah.
sometimes we got to remind ourselves, like, I sometimes get tired of that whole inner child conversation that happens a lot, but
Yeah.
sometimes we probably need to remind ourselves,
Yeah.
like, God called us for this, and this is a blessing.
Well, and you also need to, I mean, you need to remind yourself, and there's 100 ways you can do that. Like one of the ways I do it is I close our parent email every single week. Thank you for giving us the opportunity to walk alongside you in the discipleship of your students.
Yeah.
Thank the parents for giving me the opportunity.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, it's the parents' choice that they're there most of the time. There's a lot of kids that come on their own too, but like as far as
Sure.
parents, like parents are the reason that they started going or that they are currently going is because the family decided that this is their church. And so
Yeah.
like thank you for for giving me the opportunity to walk alongside y'all. But I'm also double messaging that because once again, this isn't about me, this is about the parents. And my goal is to make them the most effective and efficient disciplers that I can.
Yeah.
Because they spend way more time with their kids than I do. But that's a whole nother podcast episode.
And we have done it. So go back in the library.
Yeah, I don't know what episode.
Don't
I'm
know
not
what
even
it's
about
called,
to try.
but
So, but I think like when we look at that though, like you're not leading from the gospel if leadership requires you to prove yourself.
yeah.
But how does this change our ministry culture? How do we go from like this idea to where like we're driven from fear and perfection and performance and pressure? Hey, there were 4 or 3 perfection, performance, pressure, whatever that word is that we can't find.
Are we gonna get stuck on that?
No, but so instead of leading from those,
youth ministry tourist?
yeah,
Sorry.
instead of those, I was about to go on a roll, man. Like,
I know. I'm sorry.
it's okay. When the gospel shapes leadership, ministry culture shifts. So instead of leading from fear, we get the opportunity to lead from freedom. Instead of perfection, we lead from honesty. Instead of performance, we get growth. I'm going to say that one again. Instead of performance, we get growth. Have you ever considered that those are on different sides of the table? And then instead of pressure, we get trust. And so students begin to feel safe, to be honest. Church and the youth group become safe spaces. They feel like they are free to grow. And they are known without pretending. Like those, if there are 3 goals for the environment of our program, that should be it. That they are safe to be honest, that they are free to grow, and they are known without pretending.
Mm-hmm. That last one is probably what breaks most Christians.
Yep. I mean, yeah, without a doubt. The culture has to reflect the message. So if you are preaching the message of Jesus, yet your youth group is cliquey and really, really popular crowd and everybody else is ignored, or like not extending grace to each other, not a place where they can share safely, like you're preaching one thing and showing another.
Man, okay. I'm not allowed to share this, but I'm doing it anyway. He will forgive me. Because I think this really matters. So my buddy Joel Vaughn has a song coming out in a couple of weeks, actually. But it's a song called Love Like God Does. And So, to make this okay, I'm going to go ahead and say wherever you listen to music, go pre-save Love Like God Does, because he's already got links and stuff. But what I love about this song, I'm just going to read some of the lyrics to you. Living in a world of no too much, the differences we have dividing us, all that you're against and all you're for, trying to win the battle, but you lose the war. I'm not going to fight to change your mind. I'm not going to try to pull you to my side. All your daily hot takes and rage bait, I'm going to let it push. I'm not going to let that push me away. I just want to love like God does. But what I really love is this right here. And this is, man, if this isn't the state of the church. The next verse, another Sunday morning, and there we are, sitting side by side but feeling worlds apart. Isn't it okay for you and me to be there for each other even when we disagree? I'm like, oh, like he is not pulling punches on this one. He's like, at the end of the day, I just want to love like God, to not take things for granted, and to love people, to live with grace and mercy. That's what it means to love.
Yeah.
And it's like so much of our ministries have turned into this perform. I guess it's performance based in a different way than it was. Performance as in like we've got it all put together and stuff like that. But now it seems like from at least a social media culture is having the hottest take and being right and rage baiting each other and doom scrolling, and there's a lot of everything is based
Yeah.
in fear and anxiety, and very little of it is actually based in truth. And so we're all just mad and angry and afraid and anxious and a little depressed, with the economy and different things like that. And it's like, can we just get back to simply loving people like God does, and coming together through that? And so I think it's really. I told Joel the other day, I feel like it's a really important song that I hope that people listen to and not tune out.
Yeah.
Because this is what our ministries could look like if we stopped making it about being right and being performed like to look right or look good or look perfect or look whatever or better than the church across the street, and just loved people the way that God did. That's gospel-centered ministry altogether. If our worship services, if our youth ministry, if every bit of our culture was about, I mean, like you said, like coming away from like being super cliquey. And let's be honest, we naturally gel with certain people, and maybe not so much other people. But if you've got a fairly diverse youth ministry culture where every person, no matter where you come from, what school you go to, what you look like, whatever, everybody is greeted the same,
Yeah.
everyone is loved the same, and everyone is presented the same bit of gospel, then you're doing it right. You're loving like God does.
Yeah. I mean, going back to what I said just a second ago, it's the mindset of the culture has to reflect the message.
Mm-hmm.
So, how do we lead volunteers and students differently? This impacts not only us, but it impacts how we lead people too. With students, we disciple with patience and not frustration. And I can just say that one phrase and you immediately have a student pop into your head, because I had two in that sentence, where it's we disciple with patience and not frustration. With volunteers, we lead with encouragement and not constant pressure. And with ourselves, we lead with grace, not condemnation. We stop trying to be impressive. We start trying to be faithful. We lead ourselves with grace, not condemnation. We stop trying to be impressive, and we start trying to be faithful. I think one of the biggest problems in church today, as far as youth ministry goes, is we have churches that believe in influence more than they believe in the gospel. I don't say that lightly. We have churches that want to find the guy or the girl that will lead their program or lead their church into more prosperity.
Yeah.
Instead
ultimately.
of trusting and trying to be faithful with what God's given them already. Like, there's a reason that the average life of a youth pastor is 18 months. It's because the youth pastor themselves is always looking for bigger and better. And it's because the churches are too.
Yeah.
So,
can I just say, I'm sure it's been said here, but can I just say that youth ministry is not a stepping stone to a larger platform? I think it needs to be said more often. Youth ministry is not a stepping stone. Your church is not a stepping stone for a bigger platform, or can we call it what it is, a bigger throne for you? Youth ministry is an opportunity to show students that God fiercely loves them, and we get to do this.
yes.
Whether you're in a small church, medium church, large church, be where God has put you and not looking to what comes next.
I think that's a fine thing to say, and I've said it multiple times, but I'm going to rephrase that just a second.
Sure.
I think it's all about perspective.
Mm-hmm.
Youth ministry is not a stepping stone if you're acting in obedience.
Yeah. Of course.
So I think it's the perspective of, because I definitely have felt, because I mean, I've heard that my entire life. Youth ministry shouldn't be a stepping stone, or all the youth pastors are just trying to become pastors, blah, 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 blah. No, if I wanted to be a pastor, I would have just done it right off the bat.
Yeah.
I didn't want to. However, I for the youth pastor that might be listening to this that feels guilty for stepping out, because I want to be careful with that, because that's, if you're stepping out due to obedience, you're not using it as a stepping stone.
No, yeah, that's the exact opposite of what I'm talking about.
No, but
I'm just talking
think
about people who are
I
looking
think it's
at
just
it
that
as
phrase.
I have to have this experience
Yes.
to get to that point, if that makes sense.
I think that phrase is used a lot, and I think that, like, the message behind that phrase is fine, but I think it's all about perspective.
Yeah,
If
of course.
you were in your church for the right reason and God's calling you to move to a larger church, that might be because you were faithful in the one that you were in.
Yeah.
And so, like, I'm not even saying that what you said was wrong, David. I know that I have struggled with that. Of like I've only been here for 2 years, or I've only been here for 3 years, or like kind of thing like that. And I feel like that can oftentimes draw a lot of like guilt of like, oh, well, I'm leaving this church, but I said that they were good enough, kind of thing like that, and now they aren't. If you're leaving out of obedience, it's not a bad thing.
Right.
So
yeah, that's a completely different.
Yeah, it's all about perspective. But quite honestly, if you're leading with obedience, it was never a stepping stone to begin with.
Right.
So it's all a matter of perspective of how you see what you're doing. If you are in it for the performance aspect, it's a stepping stone.
Yeah.
So, like I said, I have definitely struggled with that concept, and I just kind of wanted to articulate, like, even the mindset of like now, like I'm looking at ordination. I've said that over the last couple episodes. Currently going through to become ordained as a pastor. Like, I might become a senior pastor, but if I do it, I'm to do it out of obedience, not because it's been my ultimate goal this whole time. Like, I didn't do 15 years of youth ministry to prepare myself for the pastoral role. I did youth ministry because God called me to ministry. At the time, it's youth. So, yes. I'm going to read that last 3 lines that I read just a little bit ago. We lead with grace, not condemnation. We stop trying to be impressive and we start trying to be faithful. So, because Jesus rose, going back to the gospel, because Jesus rose, we are not building ministry alone. Like I said, there is no greater damage to the church than bigger and better. We're not building the ministry alone. God's already at work. That means we can release control, we can trust the process, and we can lead with peace. The resurrection reminds us that the power behind the ministry is not us, it's God. Even going back to my men's Bible study yesterday, they were talking about the influence and the power behind Billy Graham and Charles Templeton, and they were like, I wonder, like, and they started kind of talking about like this idea, and it was a short discussion. It got kind of nicked real quick, but someone had brought up the idea of like, is the work that Charles Templeton, like, is the work that he had done watered down because he wasn't a believer himself? And I was like, y'all are missing the point completely. Like, Billy Graham is not a great savior. Billy Graham was a great redirector.
Yeah.
He said, hey, I know you're dealing with this problem, but have you met Jesus? Like,
my wife would be so proud of you.
Billy Graham is the greatest wingman, if anything.
Oh no, he went there.
No, but I mean, I say that, but like,
but you're right.
In all reality, it's like, it's not because Billy Graham was a great person. It's Billy Graham understood who the great person was.
Exactly, and God used him in an incredible way to impact a lot of lives.
So the power behind ministry is not us, and the quicker we learn to completely squash that pride, the better.
Yeah, I mean, to your point, there's been so many times where I felt the pressure of like, I wish I was more charismatic in the sense of like, and I don't mean like, snake charming. I'm talking like, I wish I had something that drew people in. Like I don't have the personality of someone who people are going to flock to.
Yeah.
I'm the person who has to bring people in one at a time because I'm too shy and quiet to bring in a huge crowd, if that makes sense. I'm not going to be a person who's going to sell tickets, so to speak.
Yeah.
Or that rock star kind of. And there's a lot of churches that are looking for those kind of people.
Yeah.
Those, I will never be that person, but I can fiercely love the people that God has given me. And I can help them know, more importantly, that than even our church showing you love, that there's a God who loves you and is pursuing you and wants a relationship with you. And, when the gospel centeredness happens, you don't have to be that. But I felt so much pressure of like, okay, if I'm going to get up and preach, I have to be more dynamic. That's really the word I should use. I wish I was more dynamic. I wish I was a better communicator. I stumble over myself. I'm super insecure. I'm a nerd. I'm all these things. But like, God didn't call me to be that. If he did, he would have designed me that way. And I have to remind myself that.
Yeah. God
created me. And I don't mean it in the sort of, modern way of you're perfect just the way you are. I just mean God created me with a purpose and plan, and I need to lead the way that God has designed me to.
Yeah.
And not be insecure about not being dynamic enough or not being, well articulated enough, but just be who I am and know and trust that that's enough.
Yeah.
Because again, it's not us who does the work. It's the Holy Spirit. It's God working through us and in the hearts and the minds of the people who do listen.
Yeah.
And so whether that's 2 people, 200 people, 2,000 people, whatever, enjoy, the blessing of what God has given you.
Sure. No, without a doubt. Yeah, I was totally going to say something and I lost it.
Sorry.
No, you're fine. I just, no idea. It disappeared. My brain started going in other directions. So with that though, like we have to understand that in order to do this right, we have to be the lowest man on the totem pole. And I'm just really talking about my relationship with God. Um, but with this being the last episode of this series, as we close, this is kind of what we reflect on. Does the way I lead reflect the gospel that I preach? If not, where are you leading from pressure instead of grace? Where are you controlling instead of trusting? And where are you performing instead of abiding? The invitation is simple. Let the gospel shape not just your words, but your leadership. A gospel-centered ministry is built by leaders who are personally shaped by the gospel. Like, you cannot call yourself a gospel ministry if you are not being led by it. So, with that being said, episode 252 in the books. Crazy. Still. Wow. Some would call that. I'm not going to go there. Never mind. I was going to do another reference from the TV show. For if you're
Once
like,
we
what
get started,
TV show are they
you will
talking
see
about?
so many references.
What it How I Met Your Mother.
How I Met Your Mother
is the
100%. There was once an episode, and I felt really bad. I think Melissa was in on the episode. This was a couple of seasons ago, and I made an Office reference, and Brent made it his mission to throw as many Office references as he could. I picked up like by the first one. I was like, oh, okay, I see what you're doing here. And so we were like we were trying to outdo each other on Office references.
7 Office references into that episode.
I don't know exactly. I wasn't counting, but I threw a whole bunch of Office references, and him and I are like trying to hold it together and not laugh.
Yeah.
And Melissa was like, what was y'all's deal? And we're like, you didn't notice the Office references? She didn't catch any of them. Yeah. And there was at least 15. Yeah. Like, at least.
Yeah.
And so I guess I'll just, because of the fact that you brought in at least 2, I think it was 3, How I Met Your Mother references, the Dundee goes to you, buddy.
I only count 2, but it's fine. Kind of getting off track. We love you guys. Thank you for listening. If you know anybody that would be like, that would get something out of this podcast, we very, very much would appreciate you sharing it with your friends in ministry, period, or just friends altogether. Because quite honestly, like, a lot of the things that we talk about could go into how you lead your family, this could very much just be conversations of leadership. We do obviously oriented on students because we are student ministry conversations. But with that being said, if this is impactful for you, share it with a friend of yours that's in ministry, or just tell us. We'd love to hear from you. We'd love to have a chance to talk. But we very, very much enjoy this. We love you guys. Thank you for listening. Thank you for listening all over the world, which is still wild too. That's crazy. Norway and Romania, shout out. And UK.
We're just going to keep shouting you out because we're real proud of that.
I'm just like, I still hold to the nature of like, whoever listens in Norway or Romania, send us a message on social media. Like, we want to talk to you and figure out like what ministry is like there, how you're doing it, how you're doing all the things, because that's just like, we know it exists, but like unfortunately America kind of exists in their own little bubble. And
100%.
we'd love to hear from the youth ministry people, if you are in ministry, or we'd just love to hear from the people overseas and just talk differences in ministry and how that y'all do things. And I think it'd be a fun conversation, maybe even an episode on the podcast in the future. Man, that'd be fun. Do a global youth ministry series.
Bro, that would be so fun.
Just saying, that'd be fun. So,
So if you're listening,
Yeah.
and we're not just talking about Norway and Romania. If you're listening and you happen to be in, even if you're in America, reach out to us. But if you're in Canada or Norway or Alaska, even I don't know, somewhere where maybe ministry looks a little different and stuff like that, and like you're hearing the podcast and you go, okay, but our church structure is so different than what you're. Let's
Yeah.
talk about it. I
Yeah.
mean, this is called the Student Ministry Conversations because we want it to be a conversation.
Yeah.
We used to say it a lot, is that we are inviting you to our virtual table, and the whole thing is like, we have our coffee here. We would love to have a conversation with you,
Yeah.
and would love to have you on the podcast if you're willing. So if you're listening and you've been thinking about it, yeah, I always have my coffee here. Like, let's have a conversation. And
Your unhealthily large coffee compared to my normal coffee.
this is yeah, but you drink like 7 of those. This is my one coffee for the entire day. So, and that's not even an exaggeration. Brent drinks like 3 pots of coffee a day. Okay, maybe not that. That part is an exaggeration, but you drink way more coffee than I do.
Yeah. But with that being
But
said,
mine is a
like,
quad shot,
we would
to be
love to do
fair.
that. We would love for you guys to just tell us how ministry goes in other places. It'd be a really cool conversation.
Yeah.
Like I said, it'd be a great theme for a podcast series too. Have a different guest from a different country every week.
I do have one. 100% if I called him,
Yeah,
he'd do it.
we can
In
potentially work
London.
towards that. So, but with that being said, let's end like we have been doing for most of the last 25 episodes, and that's we would love to close in prayer for you guys. So if you will pray with us, we will pray, and then we'll close out this episode. God, we thank you for today. We thank you for the leaders that are listening to this. God, we pray for their families. We pray for their ministries. We pray for them as leaders. God, we just pray that as we finish out this gospel-centered ministry theme, that God, you show us where we're not leading by the gospel, and you challenge us and convict us to fix that. Allow your gospel to be transformative in every area of our lives. And God, I just pray that as the youth pastor listening to this goes about their day, that you will give them strength and peace and patience and wisdom and courage, whatever they need to tackle the week ahead of them. And as we get into the season of busyness, for the last month of the school year, God, I just pray that you will be with the youth pastors as they are leading and ministering to the kids that are dealing with stress and chaos and all the different things. We ask all these things in your son's name. Amen.